In this lesson, I want to go back and talk more about constructors. We've kind of ignored them in the previous lesson, and I want to just make sure that you understand how constructors are formed in a derived class. So I've taken the manager class and removed the constructor call for manager, and let's put it back in. First thing we're going to do, though, is create a default constructor, assuming that no data is passed in for the object. Then we just write manager open close parentheses, and then we want salaried to be defaulted to a true value. So we put that here. We're using the message passing or functional style over assignment in this case because it certainly is easier to understand. And then an open and close block to indicate to the compiler that that's an empty body for our default constructor. You might even want to put a little comment here. Then our regular or parameterized constructor begins with the keyword manager, followed by all the data that we're going to pass in, followed by a call to the base constructor. And I forgot to mention, with the default constructor, the base constructor is called automatically. So we don't have to put a reference up here to the base constructor in a default constructor situation. And then finally we need to add our body. This time we'll use a standard assignment statement to assign is salaried to salaried, and then close off the brackets. So there's the constructor. The hardest thing to follow is the syntax with the colon followed by the base class constructor. You just have to understand this is how a derived class constructor is built when we want to call the base class, which we have to do to assign it the parameters name and pay rate. So here we've seen two examples of constructors, and before we leave this lesson, I want to cover one more topic, and that is a destructor. Destructors are used to clean up any sort of resource allocation that's been made when an object is deleted from a program. We're going to look at destructors in more detail later in the course, but this is a good time just to introduce the syntax for creating them. A destructor is similar to a constructor in that it uses the same name as the class, except we put a tilde before it. So that indicates a destructor, and then we can just put a little comment here, free allocated resources. So what does that mean? Well, for example, you might have a connection to a database or allocate memory somewhere in an object's code. And when that object is deleted, you want to free up that memory or that database connection so that you don't have a memory leak and perhaps cause your program to crash. So we can also go back to the employee class and add a destructor for it also. And again, we're not doing anything with these other than showing you how they are formed. So the key thing to remember is that the destructor starts with a tilde. There's the one for employee. Here's manager. And that the destructor is called automatically. You don't have to make a call to the destructor. It will be called automatically when an object is deleted from a program. So that wraps up this lesson on constructors and destructors. And now we're ready to move to our first example program in this first chapter on inheritance.